I wrote a funeral scene in the middle of a middle school class yesterday, and this was among a classroom of sixth, seventh, and eighth graders deemed special needs. And there's only 6 days in the school year left, so their give a fuck meter was very low, and there wasn't much left for the students to do. And the weird thing was, I realized that one, I try not to use my phone when I'm in a class like that, especially when I'm in with younger kids, because then if they see you using your phone, then they're like, "Oh, it's all right if I use my phone." And of course, using phones is highly discouraged by the school, and I just think it's just kind of unprofessional anyway. But yeah, so I for some reason had forgotten to bring my notepad with me, which I usually carry just in case, so I can just write down notes or or just ideas. But yeah, I didn't have it. So I found a scrap piece of paper in the teacher's desk, and I flipped it over and I started writing by hand out a scene. And what was interesting was that, I'm used to whenever I create characters in a story, I sometimes use this kind of machine to come up with characters and come up with just start defining who they are. But I didn't have access to that. I didn't have access to the teacher's computer. I couldn't use my phone. Well, I ended up using my phone, but what I decided to do was I decided to do this exercise where I took three different words. And this was actually a really fun writing exercise. Maybe you can try it. But I took three different words to define this character. Two of the words were positive traits, and the last one had to be used as a negative trait. So I was trying to describe the main protagonist's ex-wife. Her mother is the one who's passed away in the story of Prompted Hearts. This is this novella that I'm working on. And I needed just, okay, well, we're at all I had written in my bulleted notes was it's the funeral. And I just knew something told me I need to start this with a line of dialogue, and it needs to be like the message needs to be not only a eulogy about the mother's life, but it needs to be a reflection on on the main protagonist, Sam, his marriage with Kyoko. Kyoko is his ex-wife. And it needs to be kind of that parallel. But I had nothing else planned about the scene. That was all I had. So I was like, well, the first thing I need to do is figure out, well, who are we talking about? Who died and what about them was remarkable? And when I started thinking about it, funerals are kind of like graduations. It's a generally one note event, and people tend to usually say the same things at these functions. It's it's oh, they were so great and their laugh was so infectious and everything they stood for, blah blah blah, all that stuff. If you watched any funeral scene in a movie, then you pretty much know how this goes. So I was already like, okay, how do I punch this up? How do I make this something that it would be interesting? Wouldn't just be one of these funerals where you just kind of go and stand there, cry a little, or just look sad and leave. Well, it would help if the person who died was somewhat interesting, was not just, you know, average Jane off the street. So I took these words that I got. I got three random words from dictionary.com. Silent night. What was the other one? It was uh, oak forest. I don't know why it was giving me combos. And thunder mug. the thunder mug was the negative trait. So then I just started pulling apart these words and playing with them. And I really highly recommend this exercise if you're um, just one, it'll stretch your capability to just, basically I was working with minimal resources to write a scene. And it'll, it's fun too. It's fun to just take these words and kind of pull them apart and say, okay, when I think of Silent Night, I think of Christmas time. I think of the song Silent Night. I mean, silent night, like quiet at nighttime. Someone who was, maybe you didn't really know she was there, but she was always there and she kind of lived a dynamic life in certain ways. So this character starts emerging from these words. And then the last one, Thundermug, that was something that I had never heard before, at least not in combination. I thought of Thundermug and it said the definition of it was chamber pot. And I was like, okay, chamber pot, uh, taking a shit. You just start kind of riffing on the word. Thunder. What does thunder do? Thunder is the sound before the lightning. It's the boom. It's the force before something big and flashy happens. So I started rolling with that. I was like, thunder mug, thunder mug. And I started thinking mug. I started thinking like coffee, alcohol. So I came up with this character who she's basically a closet alcoholic. And then we ground that in a perspective and then this is a novella. So if this was a novel, I would have introduced a new character. But because this is a novella and I don't want it to go too long, I stuck with just using the ex-wife character because we've already introduced her. This is about halfway through the story, by the way. So reader already knows who the ex-wife is, and it was good because the ex-wife kind of comes off. She's already in the ex-wife role, which already makes her kind of, and the story is told from the protagonist, the male protagonist, uh, perspective. Which, by the way, I thought about it. I was like, man, there's not that I know of. Most first person narratives that I've read are if they're first person, they're female perspective. But as I've been writing this, I was like, man, I don't even venture into the male psyche, like first person male novels and books. I- I'm not going to say they're rare, but I just can't think of any off the top of my head. I mean, most romance books are from first person female perspective. That is a common perspective. Um, but first person male, actually, I did read a first person male perspective earlier this year, but like I said, it's kind of rare. And I realized that because I was like, if you're really getting into the head of a guy, um, you've got to be, you can't hold back. There's certain ways that it's just, if you're a guy, you know what I'm talking about. You know, if someone could read your thoughts in certain situations, and it's like, it's not as, I feel like in general, it's not as easy to pretty up as writing. I've written, I can say this as having written several female perspectives in different stories, novel length and short. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like the female perspective is easier to dress up and make nice, whereas the male perspective, it's like sometimes it's just it's not pretty in here, y'all. And to write it down, when I realized that that was the decision that I'd made to write this in first person perspective, I was like, "Oh man, this is." Yeah, some people are not gonna like this story, but you know, we've got to stick to truth. We've got to tell the truth as storytellers. But anyway, so back to the funeral scene. this is from the perspective of the ex-wife, and it's all dialogue. So as she's telling this story, two things are going to happen. We're going to not only get the story of the mother through her eulogy, through her, what she's saying, but we're going to also learn more about her at the same time. Because right now she's, and this is what I was saying about the ex-wife role, the ex anything, especially relate in a romance story like this, is always, you're already have a negative light cast on you. Just, and you don't even know the circumstances, but ex anything automatically is like, oh man, what did she do wrong? What did he do wrong? If it's ex-husband, it's just, that's the way our mind goes. Even though sometimes things just don't work out, and that happens. But that's where the mind goes. So bottom line is, we're gonna humanize her in this story. And as I was writing it, I knew I was on the right track when I started to get a little bit choked up, even when these these kids are running around, and it's the last fucking week of school, and they're making all this noise. And I was like, damn, I feel like in just one handwritten page, I I did a good job with this eulogy. And it's not done yet, but I'm getting towards the end. I don't want it to go too long because, like I said, this is a novella, and there's a lot that I could explore, but I want to make sure to constrain it to make sure we stay tighter than if I was writing a novel, to where, okay, I could really just do whatever. That's why like writing novels, because you can go as long as you want, and you can keep expanding the scope. You can add another character, you can add more reactions, you can add more things. It's just more. And I love that, just to kind of be unconstrained in my writing. But with novella, it's good practice to, okay, let's be a little bit concise, let's tighten it up, and really stay focused on what this scene is saying about these characters. And then we've got to bring it back to the main protagonist, his view. I'm probably going to end it. The eulogy is long enough to where it's probably going to be its own section, but it needs to say what it needs to say about the mother, about the ex-wife, and then about the basically theme of the story. And so, yeah, I would say trying that character creation exercise. I thought that was a lot of fun, actually, just with minimal resources. Like, how do you define someone's life? And really, that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. When somebody talks about you to other people, they typically don't get into particulars about your job and your status and where you lived in, all these statistical biographical things. None of that matters. None of that matters. They just say he was a cool guy. He was an asshole. She was very, all she cared about was money. All she cared about was her kids or her garden or whatever. That's what people remember, especially when somebody's passed on. Um, that tends to be the final note. And so I thought this was perfect for to create a character um, in the context of the story, and then just in general as a character creation method.